When growing up through grade school, you're given a certain perception of history that mostly highlights Americans as heroes. This trend continues through middle school and high school, which leaves many kids believing the wrong facts and events that happened during a time of much deceit and betrayal. This eventually spills over into college, where the same story might be told or where the truth might be revealed. This project is called Indigenous Land, and it embodies a small compilation of research I did on the Native Americans, Buffalo Soldiers, and U.S. Army generals. I'll give you a synopsis on what I thought before researching this topic and contrast that with the truth about the events surrounding the Native Americans and the U.S. Army. My research began with the legendary Buffalo Soldiers, who I heard nothing but good things about when growing up. My parents made light of them whenever they spoke about what African Americans did for this country. This reason, combined with the fact that they were so rarely discussed in history books, made it more appealing to make them a prime focus of my thesis project. What I was about to find out was not what I wanted to hear or believe. I started my research by reading books specifically about the Buffalo Soldiers' history and the U.S. Army. There were several accomplishments that were clarified through each written work, but there were also some other truths that are often overlooked when discussing the Buffalo Soldiers. The most disregarded fact is that they assisted in committing genocide against innocent people who are indigenous to the land we now call the United States of America. After realizing that the Buffalo Soldiers took part in those events, I had no choice but to change up the direction of my research to include the Native Americans. This decision led to a perception change in my thinking, and I was able to understand what the agenda was for the U.S. Army and Buffalo Soldiers. When researching the Native Americans' history, I began to realize that they were so spread out amongst the land. They also weren't equipped as well as the Army was. The use of bows and arrows were meaningless against an instant shotgun blast that could be initiated at any given time. These were two big weaknesses of the Native Americans, but the one that I feel stands amongst any other is their trust. This was the lone reason why the Spanish were able to get onto this land, throughout the land, and inevitably get the upper hand in taking over it. The Native Americans were role models in showing Europeans how governments were structured, how to navigate around the land, and even gave them information for curing illnesses. It only got worse for the Native Americans as time went by. They were pushed further west and relocated to different areas of this place now known as the United States. Many battles were fought and plenty of uprisings were started, but the Native Americans still ended up with the short end of the stick. The land where buffaloes once roamed in droves turned desolate, and the people that took good care of it are nearly no more. And the worst part about it is that Europeans received a little bit of help from that group called the Buffalo Soldiers. As I continued to do research on the 9th and 10th Cavalry regiments, it was apparent what the mission was for both units, and that was to push as many native tribes to the west as possible. If they had to resort to murder to make it happen, then the U.S. Army was all for it. The motto for the 9th and 10th regiments are, "We can, we will," and "ready and forward" respectively. The 9th Cavalry motto fits perfectly as Europeans did as they pleased on this land. But the 10th Cavalry motto is very contradictory. First off, the African Americans wouldn't have been ready to fight the natives if they didn't have the type of artillery that they did. Second, how does killing innocent people represent moving forward? In my opinion, I feel the African Americans in the Army set themselves back in one particular area, and they also did the same to the Native Americans, all while being treated like dirt the whole time they served. The one way African Americans set themselves back was on an economical standpoint. It would have been tough, but if they would have stuck together after the slavery era, they could have built their own communities and businesses, which would have translated into self-sufficiency amongst their own. A good example of this is the town of Rosewood, which was located in Florida. The town was predominantly black, and most of the businesses there created economic growth for everyone who lived in the area. However, many blacks decided to join the Army because they had no money and were looking for work. Now, it's one thing to hurt yourself, but it's a whole other if you hurt someone else. The natives did nothing to deserve the treatment that they went through, and their entire race of people are nearly extinct because of Europeans and the small percentage of African Americans that had a hand in it. So as I look at American history in general, I see nothing but betrayal and hypocrisy. This nation claims to be the land of the free, but it was taken by brute force, and then those who were here were treated like animals, and the ones who came here were made into slaves. As being a devout Christian, God says in the book of Revelations, chapter 17, verse 5, "And upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots, and abomination of the earth." That place is the United States. There is no excuse for what the Europeans did to the Native Americans, and all the people should look at this atrocity and realize that it could have been themselves that were in this very situation. A good question to always ask is, what would the world have been like if this event never took place? I would like to assume that the world would be more united than it is right now, but that can never be a fact. However, don't forget who is indigenous to the land.